The morning Marcus Cole opened the city's planning portal and saw the $2.8 million Willamette River Park project accepting bids, he closed his laptop and sat in the dark for 11 minutes. The screen glow faded. The cursor blinked on a page he had bookmarked 7 weeks ago and visited 43 times since without clicking a single link. His Master of Landscape Architecture diploma from Oregon State hung behind a framed photograph of Denise on the bedroom shelf, tilted slightly where Zoe had bumped it, chasing a moth last Tuesday. 3 years since the I-5 accident. 3 years since he packed a 7-month career at Portland's Forest Hills Park project. $4.2 million, 12 acres featured in Landscape Architecture magazine into a cardboard box and drove south to Eugene with a 4-year-old asleep in the back seat and $1,100 left in checking. Now the checking account read $347. The bungalow cost $800 a month. Electric ran $142. Water $67. Car insurance $189. And the stack of envelopes on the kitchen counter grew a little taller each Friday, like a paper plant that fed on silence. Marcus trimmed hedges, mowed lawns, mulched beds, edged sidewalks. Cole Landscaping, 4.8 stars, 23 reviews. Enough to keep Zoe in sneakers and oatmeal, but never enough to make him forget what his hands were actually trained to build. He drew at night. After Zoe fell asleep, after the dishes dried, after the porch light across the street clicked on inside that red-tiled house he tried not to stare at, he opened AutoCAD on the second-hand ThinkPad and sketched riverside contours, native plant zones, ADA-compliant pathways, FEMA zone drainage systems designs. No one asked for proposals. No one would see a portfolio growing in a folder labeled Someday on a desktop cluttered with invoices for $30 mo jobs. He told himself the work kept his skill sharp. The truth was simpler and harder. Drawing was the only hour of the day he still felt like the man Denise married. 6:14 in the morning. Oatmeal with brown sugar. Zoe's non-negotiable ratio of 3:1 oats to sugar that she enforced with a measuring spoon she had labeled Science Spoon in red marker. She sat cross-legged on the kitchen chair, bare feet swinging. A poster board spread across the table showing the solar system in crayon and glitter glue. Daddy, Saturn has 146 moons. 146. When I was in school, they said 82. Science changes. Daddy, you've got to keep up. He laughed and the sound surprised him because it came from somewhere unguarded. She had Denise's timing. That deadpan delivery followed by a grin missing 2 front teeth. He poured her orange juice and watched her tape a glitter ring around Saturn with the focus of a surgeon. Daddy, how come you fix Miss Clare's house, but our step is still wobbly? The juice carton paused mid-pour. He set it down carefully. On the counter behind him, the bills sat in their pile. Through the window, his truck waited in the driveway with rakes and Edgars and leaf blowers. Tools of the job he chose because it let him pick her up at 3 o'clock every afternoon. He kissed the top of her head and changed the subject to moons. But her question followed him out the door and into the truck and down the street like a rock in his shoe he could feel with every step. The house across from his belonged to Clare Harrington. Red tile roof, $780,000 appraisal, according to county records, inherited from her father, Richard Harrington, who died in a car accident 2 years ago, almost to the week. The yard told the whole story for anyone willing to read it. Grass grew past the walkway edges. Lavender spilled over the path without apology. Vines climbed the wooden fence at their own pace, slow and indifferent to property lines. It was not ugly. It was grief wearing the disguise of neglect. Clare was 35, graphic designer, freelance. Earning $14,000 a month, according to the neighborhood gossip that traveled through Mrs. Eleanor Ellis-like signal through copper wire. She kept her brown hair tied back. She moved through her days quietly, as if noise itself might crack something she had spent 2 years holding together. Marcus knew her the way suburbs teach neighbors to know each other. A wave from the driveway, a nod at the mailbox, a polite distance that felt safer than curiosity. Then the summer storm split a branch off the Douglas fir in his front yard and everything that was safe stopped being enough. The rain hit hard and vanished in 20 minutes, leaving the streets smelling like wet pine and shattered wood. Marcus was dragging branches to the curb when he noticed her standing at the gray fence between their properties, arms wrapped around herself, a streak of acrylic paint on her left elbow, cadmium yellow, the kind used in design mock-ups. Her eyes carried the bruised look of someone who had been losing arguments with her own pillow for months. Marcus. His name in her voice landed strangely, soft, uncertain, almost fragile, like a word she had practiced saying before walking outside. He leaned on the rake. Hey, storm get you too. She swallowed, looked at her hands, looked back up. Pink climbed her cheeks like she had already embarrassed herself in the rehearsal. Her brain ran before her mouth opened. It's been 2 years. I haven't had a man in my house for 2 years. The street went silent. No birds, no traffic, no lawnmower 3 blocks over. His pulse hit so hard he felt it behind his eyes. His mouth opened before his brain caught up. And when the words came out steady, even though nothing inside him was, well, you've got me now. Her eyes went wide, hands waved fast, face turning the color of her roof tiles. Not like that. I mean, the kitchen faucet leaks. A light bulb is dead. One cabinet door is hanging by a prayer. I can't fix things. I just feel stuck sometimes. Relief poured through him so fast he almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because he had been holding air in his chest without knowing it. Let me grab my toolbox. Her shoulders dropped 3 inches. I hate asking. Don't. I work with tools all day. Her gate opened with a creak that said it hadn't swung inward for anyone in a long time. Lavender and wet grass brushed his jeans on the walk to her front door. Inside, cool air, coffee smell, old book smell. A worn couch flanked by shelves of design magazines and framed sketches on every wall. Clean lines, careful detail, the kind of draftsmanship that made his architect's eyes stop and pay respect. She had real talent. Disciplined, patient, precise. It shifted something in the way he saw her, like adjusting a lens and suddenly finding the subject in focus. The kitchen faucet dripped into a stainless steel sink. Each drop echoed off the quiet like a clock counting down something neither of them had named. He knelt, checked the pipes, found the worn washer, replaced it, tightened the fittings. 7 minutes. My dad used to fix everything. Her voice floated from the counter where she leaned, watching not just his hands, but the way he organized each tool back into its slot. Precise, automatic. I'm sorry. That's hard. It feels like yesterday sometimes. He turned the water on. The dripping stopped. The silence it left behind was different. Lighter, like a room after someone opens a window. You're not just a lawn guy, are you? Not a question. Her eyes tracked the way he scanned her kitchen on the way out, the way his gaze measured the cabinet alignment and the ceiling fixture angle without thinking. You looked at my yard when you walked in like someone designing a space, not cleaning one. His hand paused on the toolbox latch. He gave a small smile. That answered nothing and headed for the door. Marcus, he turned. Thank you. It's been a while since anyone just showed up. He held her gaze 1 second longer than neighbors hold anything. The air between them carried a warmth it had no logical reason to carry. Any time. He crossed the street. His yard looked the same. His porch looked the same, but the frequency of the evening had shifted, like a radio dial bumped 1 notch off the station he'd been tuned to for 3 years. He sat on the porch, beer in hand, unopened, eyes drifting to the red-tiled roof across the road. What he did not see, Eleanor Ellis, 63, standing at her living room window 2 houses east. Phone already in hand, watching the black man who had just spent 40 minutes inside Clare Harrington's house walk back across the street with a toolbox. She dialed the non-emergency line. Her 44th call in 6 years. I'd like to report suspicious activity on Maple Lane. That call would join 43 others in a database Marcus hadn't searched yet. 43 descriptions of suspicious black and brown people, delivery drivers, tutors, plumbers, joggers, none of whom committed a crime, all of whom left a digital footprint that made the algorithm trust Eleanor's neighborhood a little less every year. 3 black families had moved out in the last 4 years. None moved in. And the company that bought each of their houses every single time at 8 to 12% below market value was registered under one name, Harrington Realty Partners. Owner Patricia Harrington, Claire's mother. Marcus sat on his porch thinking about a leaky faucet and a woman who hadn't let anyone through her door in 2 years. He didn't know about the 44 calls. He didn't know about Harrington Realty. And he didn't know that the quiet street he had chosen for its safety was running a machinery of exclusion so efficient it didn't need signs or speeches, just a grandmother with a phone and a pattern no one had bothered to chart. But his daughter knew something was wrong. His phone buzzed. Zoe calling from Denise's mother's house where she spent Tuesday evenings. Daddy, a kid at school asked me why you cut grass for people. He said you're the help. I told him you're an architect, but nobody believed me. Silence. 4 full seconds. You told the truth, baby. Then how come you don't do architect stuff, Daddy? He didn't answer. Outside, Claire's porch light glowed across the dark street. Behind him, the laptop sat closed on the kitchen table. The someday folder waiting inside it like a promise he kept making to a version of himself he wasn't sure still existed. He didn't know that the answer to Zoe's question and the woman across the street and the 44 calls in the police database and the $2.8 million project blinking in a browser tab he was afraid to click were all the same thread. He didn't know yet. But in 5 days his 7-year-old daughter would do what 3 years of grief could not. She would make him stop hiding, and nothing on Maple Lane would stay quiet after that. 5 days after Eleanor Ellis made her 44th call, Zoe came home from school with a science fair ribbon and a question that broke something open. She set the ribbon on the kitchen table. Second place honorable mention to how native plants filter stormwater, and stood with her hands on her hips in a pose so much like Denise that Marcus had to look away for a second before he could look back. Daddy, I used your drawings, the ones on your computer in the someday folder. His coffee mug stopped halfway to his mouth. Mrs. Patterson asked where I got the diagrams. I said my dad made them. She said they looked professional. Zoe's voice climbed the way it did when she was building toward a point she had already decided on. She asked what you do and I said architect. And she got that face. That face people make when they don't believe you, but they're too nice to say it. What face? Like this. Zoe scrunched her nose and tilted her head, an imitation so precise it would have been funny if it didn't sting. So I told her to Google Marcus Cole Forest Hills Park and she did right there on her phone, and Daddy, her face changed. He set the mug down. His daughter stood 4 feet tall in light-up sneakers and a shirt with a crayon stain on the collar. And she had done in 30 seconds what he had failed to do in 3 years. She had said his name out loud in a room full of people and refused to let anyone shrink it. You're not supposed to be the help, Daddy. You're supposed to be you. The Someday folder opened that night at 11:47 p.m. He clicked the Willamette River Park bid link for the first time. The deadline was 26 days away. The scope called for native ecosystem integration, ADA-compliant pathways, FEMA zone flood mitigation, and community recreation zones across 8 acres of riverfront. Every specification matched the phantom designs he had been drawing alone for months. The same contours, the same drainage philosophy, the same belief that a park should feel like it grew from the land rather than landed on top of it. His hands trembled over the keyboard, not from doubt, from the shock of recognizing that the door had been open the whole time, and he had been the one keeping it shut. He started building the proposal that night and worked until 3 o'clock in the morning. And when he crossed the street the next afternoon with his toolbox, something behind his eyes had shifted in a way Claire noticed immediately. You look different, slept less. No, you look like you decided something. He fixed her flickering hallway light without explaining what he had decided, but she watched him work with a new attention. And when she placed the black coffee beside him, no sugar, the way he had mentioned once 3 weeks ago, he understood that she had been paying the kind of attention most people reserve for things they are afraid to lose. The days stacked. A loose cabinet handle. A shelf leaning too far forward. A garage door screaming on dry hinges. Each repair took 30 minutes. Each visit lasted 2 hours. She stopped standing in doorways and started sitting at the table. Store-bought cookies appeared with no pretense of baking. Sliced apples arrived with the quiet fiction that fruit canceled out chocolate chips eaten 10 minutes earlier. They talked about her clients who treated Pantone swatches like moral emergencies and his customers who wanted emerald lawns but refused to turn on a sprinkler. She loved animated movies, the ones designed to make adults cry in the third act. He admitted a dog food commercial once wrecked him so completely he changed the channel and then changed it back because he wanted to see the dog find its way home. She laughed hard enough to cover her mouth and the sound filled the kitchen the way the dripping faucet never had. Warm, unplanned, alive. Thursday evening. Thunder rolled low across the sky while he adjusted a curtain rod in her living room. The windows shook. Claire went still. Her fingers tightened around the screwdriver she was holding for him, knuckles white. I hate thunder. It makes me feel like the walls aren't solid. He did not joke, did not tease, did not minimize. Next time it storms, text me. Why? So the walls don't have to hold by themselves. She turned away fast, but not before he saw her jaw tighten against something that wanted to surface. The screwdriver trembled in her grip. He took it gently and finished the rod, and neither of them mentioned the way her hand had brushed his fingers during the exchange, or the way neither of them pulled back. Then came the night the sky split open and proved that storms don't wait for people to be ready. The rain started at 10 and turned violent by midnight. Wind bent the Douglas fir in Marcus's yard sideways. The power flickered twice. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about walls that weren't solid when his phone buzzed at 12:41 a.m. Claire. Water coming into the basement. Tried to handle it. It's bad. He was dressed and outside in 90 seconds. The street ran like a creek, water rushing along the curbs and pooling at the storm drains, so his shoes soaked through before he reached her porch. She opened the door before he knocked. Pale, damp-haired, wearing an old sweatshirt and shorts, eyes wide with the particular panic of someone who has been fighting alone and just realized they're losing. You didn't have to come. Show me. The basement floor held 2 inches of water. A window on the east wall sat partially open. Rain blowing in sideways. Towels stuffed along the sill had surrendered. Boxes lined the walls. Her father's things, Marcus realized, labeled in handwriting that wasn't hers. He taped plastic sheeting over the window, pressed it tight, slowed the flow to a trickle. They moved boxes to higher ground and pushed water toward the floor drain with brooms side by side. No small talk, just rhythm. At 1:15 a.m., she slipped on the wet concrete, caught a shelf, and steadied herself. Then her shoulders began to shake. I thought I could do this alone. The words barely made it past her throat. You can, but you don't have to. The crack opened fast. She covered her face with both hands, and the sound that came out was not crying. It was 2 years of pressure finding the first exit it had been offered. She sobbed like someone who had held the ceiling up so long she forgot she was allowed to set it down. He pulled her against his chest. She stiffened for half a heartbeat, then folded into him like a wall, deciding it was tired of being a wall. He held her steady while the rain pounded the house above them, and he said the only thing worth saying, you don't have to pretend with me. Not now. Not ever. Her fingers gripped his shirt like an anchor. The storm softened. So did her breathing. When she finally pulled back, her face was streaked and raw. Why do you keep showing up? You could just not. Because you let me in, because some doors shouldn't stay closed for 2 years. She studied him as if testing those words for weight, checking whether they would hold if she leaned on them. He let her look. He had nothing to hide except a folder on his desktop he was finally done hiding. It was past 2 when the basement dried enough to leave. The storm still growled outside. Weaker now. Stay, she offered. Roads are bad. He didn't argue. She brought a blanket that smelled like coffee and clean laundry. And before she went upstairs, she stopped beside the couch and took his hand. Her fingers were warm and did not let go quickly. In the silence after the rain, he felt the axis of something tilt. Not romance yet, not quite, but the ground shifting beneath 2 people who had both been standing still for too long. Morning light came through her curtains like a permission slip. Coffee, black toast. The street outside looked washed and stunned. Leaves plastered to sidewalks, branches down, the air scrubbed clean. They sat at the kitchen table and didn't talk for several minutes, and the silence felt like the steadiest thing either of them had built in years. Last night, she started, staring into her mug. I'm embarrassed. About what? Needing someone. Crying like that. I hate feeling like I can't carry my own weight. He reached across and touched her fingers. You carried everything alone for 2 years. There's nothing weak about a load getting heavy. Weak is pretending it isn't. She looked at their hands. Then at him, something behind her. Expression rearranged itself. A window opening in a house that had been sealed. While the storm reshaped things between Marcus and Clare, it also triggered a phone call 2 houses east. Eleanor Ellis stood at her window at 6:07 a.m. and watched Marcus leave Clare's front door in the same clothes he had worn the night before. She did not call the police this time. She called Patricia Harrington directly. He spent the night, Patricia, inside the house all night. A long pause on the other end, then Patricia's voice, cold and efficient. I'll handle it. You should come soon before your daughter makes a decision you can't undo. Patricia opened her laptop in Portland. Searched Marcus Cole, Eugene, Oregon. Nothing notable because the professional name on every permit, publication and award was Marcus Cole. A connection Patricia did not think to make. She found the Yelp page. Cole Landscaping 4.8 stars, 23 reviews. She closed the laptop with the expression of someone who had just confirmed what she already believed. 3 days later, the Retaliation arrived on official letterhead. Marcus opened his mailbox to find 2 envelopes. The first, an HOA violation notice. Vehicle parked overnight on a non-owner property. Fine of $250 payable within 14 days. The second, a letter from Harrington Realty Partners notifying all Maple Lane homeowners of a voluntary property reassessment initiative to protect neighborhood value. Marcus read both letters twice. His jaw worked, but his voice stayed inside. Tony Reeves called that evening. 3 clients dropped me this week, bro. All in the WA zone. All said the association recommended a different service. You lose anyone. Marcus checked his email. 2 cancellations. No reason given. Account balance after the fine. $198. 22 days until the park bid deadline. $198 in the bank in a proposal that needed printing, binding, and a presentation deck he couldn't afford to have designed. He sat at the kitchen table after Zoe fell asleep and stared at the number on his banking app until the screen dimmed. The someday folder glowed on his desktop. The bills sat in their pile. For the first time since Denise died, the math of his life refused to add up in any direction that didn't require him to choose between surviving this month and building something that would last. Daddy, are we okay? Zoe stood in the hallway in pajamas, holding the stuffed otter she'd had since she was 2. She'd heard him. Not words, just the particular silence a child learns to recognize when a parent is scared. Yeah, baby, we're okay. You're using your worried voice. He pulled her onto his lap. She weighed 46 pounds and carried the entire reason he got out of bed every morning. He held her and made a decision that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with the fact that his daughter had told a classroom full of skeptics that her father was an architect and he owed it to her to make that true again. The next morning he called Clare. Not about a broken hinge, about a proposal. I need a designer. The Willamette River Park bid 8 acres, $2.8 million. And my presentation deck needs to look like it came from a firm, not a kitchen table. I can't pay you yet, but I can fix every broken thing in your house for the next year. A pause, then Claire's voice, carrying something new. Not sympathy, not pity, but the particular energy of a professional who has just been asked to do what she is best at. Send me the files tonight. I'll have concepts by Thursday. They worked in parallel for 19 days. Marcus refined the AutoCAD plans, native riparian buffers, permeable paving systems rated for 50-year flood events, an inclusive playground designed to AIDA 2024 standards, bioswales calibrated to handle 2.4 inches of rainfall per hour. Clare transformed his technical drawings into a visual narrative so clean and compelling it looked like it belonged in a TED Talk, not a municipal bid. She built infographics, rendered perspective views, and designed a cover page that used the river's own topographic lines as a visual motif. Her talent, the same talent he had noticed in the framed sketches on her walls, turned his expertise into something a review board could feel, not just evaluate. On day 15, he showed her the WA data. Not the fine, not the cancellations, the pattern: 44 calls, 5 displaced families, Harrington Realty purchasing each property below market value, 23 WA violations targeting non-white residents exclusively, and the name on the realty company's registration, Patricia Harrington. Clare stared at the screen for a long time. Her face cycled through confusion, recognition, nausea, and finally a stillness that was worse than all of them. My mother, she whispered, not a question. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. You show me everything. She channeled the anger the way she channeled color in line with precision. Over the next 4 days, she built a second deck, a visual summary of 6 years of discriminatory law enforcement, cross-referenced with property transfers, call logs, and demographic data. Every chart was clear. Every source was cited. Every page was designed to be understood by a bureaucrat in under 30 seconds. She sent the package to the Fair Housing Council of Oregon and the Bureau of Labor and Industries on Marcus's behalf, formatted so professionally that both agencies opened investigations within 72 hours. On day 19, Marcus filed the park bid. On day 20, Claire's phone rang. Patricia Harrington's voice sharp enough to cut glass. I'm coming Saturday and I'm bringing a lawyer. Clare hung up and looked at Marcus across the kitchen table, the same table where he had fixed her faucet 5 weeks ago, where she had placed his first cup of black coffee, where the distance between them had been shrinking one honest conversation at a time. 5 days, she breathed. He met her eyes. The countdown started and everything on Maple Lane held its breath. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of stillness that precedes verdicts. Marcus stood on Clare's porch at 8:15, the oak board solid beneath his feet, the same step he had repaired 3 weeks ago, the one that started everything worth starting. Clare came outside with 2 mugs, black for him, too much cream for her. She handed his over and their fingers touched and neither of them rushed to pull away. Why I need to tell you something before she gets here. Clare's voice was steady, but her pulse beat visibly at her throat. Whatever happens today, I want you to know you didn't just fix things in my house, Marcus. You made me remember I was still living in it. He set the mug on the railing, took her face in both hands. Her skin was warm from the morning sun, and her eyes held the particular brightness of someone standing at the edge of a decision they have already made. I love you. The words came out without rehearsal, without strategy, without any of the careful engineering he applied to everything else in his life. I didn't plan it. I wasn't looking for it. But I'm not going to stand here and pretend it isn't true because your mother's car is about to pull into this driveway. Clare's breath caught. Her eyes grew bright. A sound escaped her that lived somewhere between a laugh and a sob. The noise a person makes when joy arrives at the exact same moment as fear. I love you too and I don't know how to do this. I forgot how. Then we figure it out together starting with today. She kissed him not carefully, not like someone testing whether the ground would hold. She kissed him like a woman who had decided the ground didn't matter as long as the person standing on it was real. When she pulled back, her forehead rested against his, and for 3 seconds, Maple Lane was the quietest place on earth. Then a silver sedan turned onto the street, and the quiet ended. Patricia Harrington stepped out of the car in a charcoal blazer, her posture the kind that comes from decades of walking into rooms and expecting them to rearrange. Beside her a man in a navy suit, carrying a leather briefcase. The lawyer. Eleanor Ellis appeared on her own porch 2 houses down, watering can in hand, pretending she wasn't watching the way a hawk pretends it isn't hunting. Patricia walked the stone path to Clare's porch and stopped at the bottom of the steps. Her eyes moved from Clare to Marcus to their hands, which had found each other again without either of them deciding to reach. Clare tight, controlled. Then her gaze locked onto Marcus with the measuring precision of someone appraising a property. And you must be the landscaper. This is Marcus. Clare's chin lifted. My partner. The word landed between them like a stone in still water. Patricia's lips thinned. The lawyer opened his briefcase on the porch railing and began arranging documents. Inside to the kitchen table became a negotiation surface. Patricia positioned herself at the head. A habit, Marcus noted, not an invitation. The lawyer spread deed paperwork. Co-ownership filings. A preliminary listing agreement already drafted. Clare, the basement flooded. The yard is overgrown. You haven't maintained this property to standard. My name is still on the deed and I have a fiduciary responsibility to protect both our interests. The market is strong. We list at 780, close in 60 days, split net proceeds. She delivered each point like a closing argument she had rehearsed on the drive from Portland. Clare sat across from her mother with her back straight and her hands flat on the table, a posture Marcus recognized. It was the same way she sat when she was designing, when every line mattered and nothing was accidental. Mom, this is Dad's house. He built the bookshelves. He planted the lavender. He fixed every crack in these walls for 20 years. I'm not selling it because you've decided I'm too fragile to keep it. You can't manage it alone. That's not an opinion. It's an observation. Then observe this. Clare opened her laptop and turned the screen toward her mother. In the last 5 weeks, Marcus repaired the plumbing, sealed the basement window, replaced the porch step, fixed the electrical in 3 rooms, and rehung every cabinet in this kitchen. I redesigned the yard drainage plan myself using specifications I learned while building a professional presentation for a $2.8 million city project. This house is not falling apart. It was waiting for me to stop being afraid of it. Patricia blinked. The lawyer paused mid-document. Marcus stayed quiet. This was Clare's fight and she was winning it standing up. And while we're showing evidence, Clare continued, her voice dropping to something low and controlled. I want you to see what else I found. She clicked to the second file, the deck she had built from Marcus's WA research. Charts, timelines, demographic overlays. 44 calls, 5 families, 1 buyer. Harrington Realty Partners purchased every home vacated by a non-white family on this street in the last 6 years. Below market value, every time. Your company, Mom, your name. The color drained from Patricia's face in stages, like watching a tide go out. Marcus spoke for the first time since sitting down. His voice carried the calm of a man presenting technical findings, not accusations. 44 non-emergency calls from Mrs. Ellis in 6 years. 43 describing black or brown individuals. 0 criminal findings. 23 WA violations issued exclusively to non-white residents. 0 issued to white residents with identical infractions. The Fair Housing Council of Oregon and BOLI both have the full file. Investigations are open. The lawyer closed his briefcase quietly. Patricia stared at the screen, then at Clare, then at Marcus. For the first time, the architecture of her certainty showed cracks. I was protecting property values. I was protecting this neighborhood. I was protecting you. Clare's voice didn't waver. You were protecting yourself from feeling powerless. The same way I locked every door for 2 years because I thought if nothing came in, nothing could hurt me. But I was wrong, Mom. And so are you. A silence filled the kitchen that was heavier than the storm had been. Patricia's jaw worked. Her eyes grew wet, not from guilt alone, but from the recognition that her daughter had just described them both with a precision neither of them could deny. After your father died, Patricia's voice fractured for the first time. I was terrified of losing you, too. I thought if I kept control of the house, the street, the finances, I could keep you close. I was wrong about the method. I wasn't wrong about being scared. Then be scared with me instead of for me. Clare reached across the table, but the house stays and the investigation stays and Marcus stays. Patricia looked at her daughter's hand, looked at Marcus. What she saw was not a landscaper, not a threat, not a variable to be managed. She saw a man sitting quietly beside her daughter with the patience of someone who builds things that are meant to last. She took Clare's hand. The lawyer excused himself. Eleanor Ellis, watching from her window, set down her phone for the last time. No listing agreement was signed. A plan was made instead. Deed transfer paperwork, clean separation of ownership, no threats, no deadlines. Patricia drove back to Portland that afternoon with something she did not arrive with: the beginning of accountability. 6 weeks later, the Fair Housing Council issued findings. Harrington Realty Partners was fined $185,000. WA bylaws were revised to require independent annual audits and demographic impact reviews on all enforcement actions. Eleanor Ellis resigned as vice chair. Patricia Harrington's Oregon real estate license was suspended pending a 12-month ethics review. 3 of the 5 displaced families were contacted. The Robinsons, the last family pushed out 18 months prior, decided to move back. The same week, Marcus stood before the Eugene Planning Commission in a room where his presentation filled a 10-foot screen. 8 acres of riverfront rendered in detail so precise the board members leaned forward in their chairs. Native riparian zones, permeable pathways, a playground where a child in a wheelchair and a child on 2 legs could reach the same slide from the same direction. In the third row of the audience, Patricia Harrington sat watching the man she had called the landscaper explain a $2.8 million vision for a city that had never asked him to dream this big, but was now glad he did. The contract was awarded unanimously. 6 months later, Maple Lane looked different. Clare's yard had been redesigned, not tamed, but shaped. Lavender trimmed into borders. Wild grasses channeled into intentional paths. The fence repainted the same gray it had always been, but standing straighter now. Marcus's bungalow across the street had a new porch step. Zoe's Science Fair project, How Native Plants Clean Urban Waterways, first place regional qualifier, hung framed in the hallway next to Denise's photograph and Marcus's diploma. All 3 level on the wall for the first time. Zoe sat on the new step drawing Saturn's rings with a glitter pen, tongue poking out in concentration. Marcus stood on Clare's porch in the late afternoon light. She leaned against him, wearing his hoodie, hands tucked in the front pocket, watching the street where 5 families had been quietly erased and were now one by one being written back. 2 years I kept every door locked. Her voice was soft, carrying the weight of someone measuring the distance between who she was and who she had become. You didn't knock them down. You just stood there until I remembered I had the key. He kissed the top of her head. Across the street, Zoe looked up and waved. Gap-toothed grin catching the sun. Marcus Cole did not go looking for justice. He went looking for home. And when he found it, he made sure 5 other families could find theirs, too. The folder on his desktop was no longer called Someday. He had renamed it Monday because that was the day construction on the Willamette River Park was scheduled to begin and Marcus Cole was done waiting for permission to build.